Hi, this is Margaret Meloni, and welcome to the Wisdom of Impermanence podcast. Together, we will explore death, grief, and spiritual awakening through the lens of Buddhist wisdom and lived experience. Please join me in intimate conversations about mortality, loss, and transformation. If we allow ourselves to embrace the truth of impermanence, then we can move closer to freedom from anxiety, stress, and despair. Listen in, show up, transform. Let's go. I used to think that grief was about looking backward, old men saddled with regrets, or young ones pondering should-haves. I see now it is about eyes squinting through tears into an unbearable future. Kate Bowler. When your loved one dies, it's not just the end of their life. It's the end of a part of your life too. You're still here. You're not the one who died, but now you need to figure out what your life looks like without them. And what your life holds for you is grief. In hindsight, I did not even realize how deep my grief was or how much it impacted me. At first, I thought this grief thing was just something I would power through. I knew my heart was broken, and I knew that I had never experienced such sadness. But if I just kept going, eventually everything would be okay, or back to normal. Ultimately, I began to understand that there was no return to whatever I thought was normal. Things would never be the same, they would be different. And even later, I realized that there was no return. What there was a moving forward, that I would need to create a new life. And I did, more than once. I've had a life where I was very solitary and focused on work and finishing my degree. I've had a life where I went out and socialized a few times a week because I thought that's what I was meant to do with my time. I had a life where I retreated from so much socialization because I began to feel exhausted. And I've had a life where I came home, meaning I spent more time in my home and in my own neighborhood, and I became involved in more local activities and friendships. And some of that has changed. Some friendships grow and deepen, and some friendships fade away. All of this is part of what my normal looks like. Your normal will have its own nuances. But before I was able to rebuild, I did go through a time when all I could do was get up, get dressed, and handle my responsibilities. During this time, having classes to teach and classes to take helped to keep me going. Even if it meant crying on the way to a teaching engagement, fixing my face in the car before I stood in front of a group of people, and then crying all the way back home. I know that in the early stages of grieving my family members, it was all I could do to acknowledge the loss. And it was not just a quick recitation of "this is how it is," one of my more favorite sayings to help anchor me in, accepting the reality of how things are. So it wasn't just saying quickly, "this is how it is." It was many hours and days of reminding myself of the reality of my situation. And each contemplation of truth helped to carry me forward until I could know it intellectually and emotionally. There were these strange moments where I would be out in the world, and I'd see people running their errands, buying groceries, filling up their gas tanks. Didn't they know that I was utterly torn up? But eventually I began to see the routines of others as reassuring. Watching people navigate the everyday business of life gave me hope. There were others who were well and happy, and I would be too. It was good to be surrounded by people who did not seem to be impacted by death. Of course, I had no idea how many of them were watching the rest of us and thinking, how can they just be going about their business? Don't they know my loved one has died? There were days when sorting the mail would bring me to tears because I lived with a house of ghosts. Mail would come from my mother-in-law, my father, my mother, and my husband. In fact, some days, none of the mail was actually for me. Eventually, there were fewer days when I cried while looking at the mail. And finally, sometimes it made me laugh. For example, when my mother-in-law received an invitation to take a trip to the Turks and Caicos, I had to giggle. Because if she had been alive when that offer came, she would have been 105. And also, she would have wanted to go. I also came to recognize that grief was not something I was going to power through or fix. My level of strength and my ability to handle life was different. I was still going to fall back to my workaholic tendencies to distract myself, but at some point during my day, I would not be able to keep going. Early on, my grief would overwhelm me at about 4 p.m. Now at that time, I would not have recognized it as grief. I just thought it was fatigue that came from loss. Oh, wait, that actually is grief. Silly me. I would work until about 4, try to do at least one more thing, and then find other ways to keep myself busy until at least 8 or 9 p.m. because I considered that to be an acceptable time to end the day and go to sleep if I could sleep. Sometimes I would try to meditate. It turns out I was unable to meditate without it turning into one gigantic, ugly cry. So my judgy inner critic in my head told me that I was not a good Buddhist. Later, in speaking with a wise teacher, I learned that I was too fixated on what I perceived to be the right way to meditate. Walking meditation, I had forgotten about walking meditation. That probably would have been more useful. So don't be harsh with yourself. Your ability to participate in activities will change. In times of your own suffering, remember to be your own best friend. Don't think that you're doing something wrong. Don't beat yourself up over what you're not doing. Of course, you need to eat and you need to pay your bills. And if you can't do those things, then you want to get some help, of course. Accepting that you are grieving does not mean that you will be sad for the rest of your days. It also does not mean that you will not suffer. You are changing your relationship with your suffering, placing yourself in a mindset where you are open to sitting with your feelings, sadness, regret, anger, joy, confusion, whatever surfaces for you. Once you accept your current state, you can access your gratitude practice. I remember early on when I was trying to use my gratitude practice, I was trying to figure out, well, what are the benefits of having the two people who were closest to me die within a week of each other? And the answer came to me as people asked how I was doing, and I would reply, I am as well positioned as possible in a difficult situation. And that was true. In a difficult situation, I did have some things to be appreciative of. I had a roof over my head, food on the table, people who cared about me. I had some degree of security, and I didn't have to make big life-changing decisions. The more I looked for things to be grateful for, the more I found. Eventually, I would challenge myself to come up with 3 things every day for which I was grateful. Some days were super difficult, but I gave myself some grace to find 3 things every day, even if on some days I repeated a list from a previous day. That wasn't cheating. That was acknowledging that I still had some of the same things to be appreciative of, and that was very helpful to me. This was an exercise in not turning off my sorrow, not turning off my grief, but in bringing myself to accept some gratitude, in turn, helping me to renew and to restore, and providing me some relief from the grief. Because in Western culture, grief is framed typically as something to move past as quickly as possible, to return to normal. People will make statements like, but you should be okay now. What they really mean is, please don't display any signs of sadness around me. I don't want to acknowledge any difficult feelings. Whether you're grieving the loss of a parent, a partner, a child, or friend, the pain can seem all-consuming. A darkness so profound that you wonder if you'll ever find your way back to the light. When you grieve, you are confronting the ultimate impermanence, the end of a human life, the dissolution of a relationship as you knew it. The pain you feel is real. Your suffering is compounded, not just by loss itself, but by your resistance to the reality of loss. You cling to the wish that things could have been different, that you could have had more time, that death should not have come when it did. This clinging, this refusal to accept what is, it intensifies your pain. When this is true for you, it does not make you wrong or bad at Buddhism. It makes you human. To grieve well, you must gradually learn to accept impermanence, not as a curse, but as a fundamental truth of existence. This doesn't mean you stop loving those who have died. It means you love them more fully by accepting that their time was always meant to end. You love them not because you can hold on to them forever, but precisely because you cannot. Their finite time with you becomes precious. One of the most destructive patterns in grief is self-judgment, right? Like how I judged myself for not being able to meditate without crying. You might judge yourself for crying too much or not crying enough, for moving forward too quickly or too slowly, for having moments of laughter or joy when you feel like, oh, but I should be sad. Buddhism teaches metta, loving kindness, as an antidote to this harsh inner judgment. Remember that although we are discussing grieving, this isn't a graded assignment or a competition. This is you experiencing grief and taking the best possible care of yourself. Imagine holding yourself with the tenderness you would offer a child. Speak to yourself as you would speak to your best friend. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this pain. May I accept grief with gentleness. This simple practice, repeated daily, begins to shift your relationship with your pain. You stop fighting it. You stop judging it. You simply acknowledge it with compassion. When grief arises, and it will, in waves, notice it. Here's grief. This is what grief feels like in my body right now. Don't try to push it away or fix it. Simply allow it to be present, knowing that like all phenomena, it will change and shift. This practice, done consistently, teaches us that emotions are not permanent, although they feel overwhelming in the moment. Grief comes in waves. Remember, waves rise and fall. They break, they go back out to sea. This is the nature of emotion. If you are grieving, you're not broken. Your pain is appropriate. Your love was real and deserves to be honored. Begin where you are. If meditation feels too difficult, breathe. Just breathe. If joining a group feels impossible, maybe write or journal, or find one person that you can tell the truth to. Someone who won't try to fix your grief or tell you to move on. Sharing all of this with you today is not meant to be an overshare. It's not meant to tell you what to do or how to grieve. One of my favorite lessons from one of my wise teachers was this: meet people where they are. And this really resonated, especially later when it hit me that she meant me. In our discussion, she was meeting me where I was and bringing me what she knew I was able to take in. So please take my words and stories and thoughts as examples of how grief has lived in my life, how I live my life with grief. Not because I won. I didn't win grief. There's no winning. If there was some kind of grief medal, well, I had a lot of denial. I shut myself away from others. I didn't know how to ask for help. So no winning, just living. And this is just me speaking to you openly and honestly. And I will leave you with another quote, one that has become true for me. There will come a time when you believe everything is finished. That will be the beginning. Louis L'Amour. Thank you for listening in today. Check out the Wisdom of Impermanence books and other insights at www.margaretmeloni.com. And by the way, remember, that's Meloni. May you be well, may you be happy, and may you be free from suffering.